Não, é praga, bicho. Não tava chegando aqui, ela falou, mãe, você tem cada teiona de aranha, mas...
Não, mas isso aqui é ignorância.
Não era tanta aranha assim.
Cara, isso aqui vai pra internet.
Nunca vi uma coisa dessa.
Chover na aranha.
Que elas estão ali. Mas é muito, eu quero até ver ela mais.
Cara, dá até medo de andar aqui.
Aqui, mãe, dá pra ver ela certinho. Ai, mãe, elas não têm asa.
Cara, é muita.
O dela aqui, mãe, ó. Olha onde que tá tendo ela aqui que eu não tô vendo. Só tô vendo que ela tá subindo. Ó, parece que ela tá com a patinha quebrada. Ah não, tá não. Não, mas, ô Piá, aqui que fica legal.
Cara, choveu aranha.
Nunca vi uma coisa dessa, cara.
Meu Deus. Que doido, não dá pra acreditar nisso.
Aqui mesmo, cara, olha.
Você viu isso aí, seu Belo? E esse negócio aí? Você viu isso aí? Eu tinha visto? Caraca, você é diabo.
A blizzard for the history books is how some forecasters are calling the snowstorm, which is pummeling the northeastern United States. 5 governors have declared states of emergency as around 350,000 homes and businesses lost electricity, roads were closed and thousands of flights disrupted. New York's 3 major airports shut down, with stranded passengers at LaGuardia being offered emergency bedding. Over 4,000 flights were cancelled. Winds gusted to 60 kilometers per hour, driving the snow, expected to reach up to 60 centimeters in some areas. Forecasters are predicting the storm is ramping up to full strength.
By the time the storm passes early Saturday afternoon, we're expecting to have accumulations of 10 to 14 inches across the 5 boroughs based on the latest National Weather Service.
People were warned to stay off the roads, advised to remain at home and to stock up on food and other supplies. The storm is raging along the New York to Boston corridor, which is home to some 25 million people, and for many the devastation of October's Hurricane Sandy is still fresh in their minds. Meanwhile, in Canada, it's reported a snowstorm driving across southern Ontario has left at least 3 people dead.
Blizzard.
I remember the blizzard of 78. I was a kid, but it was kind of like this. Like 2.5 feet of snow, but just back then they didn't have technology they have today. They can't forecast a storm a week in advance. 2 horsepower. Ooh, man.
A massive tornado is captured on video. Southeastern parts of the USA have been plowed by a storm front in which the winds caused at least 2 people's deaths. The community of Adairsville, north of Atlanta, Georgia, was left shredded. Tornadoes were reported in Mississippi, Indiana, and Tennessee along a more than 1,000-kilometer corridor.
It lasted probably about, I'm going to say about 20 seconds maybe. Because after we done made it to the restroom, it quit.
Then when we went back, well, my truck was turned over and all the glass blowed out of it. The dog is in it. But he's not hurt, nobody's hurt, that's the main thing.
Emergency officials said minor injuries requiring hospital treatment were sporadic. The wind treated large objects like toys all the way north to Pennsylvania, which borders on the state of New York.
The situation for the Great Lakes is anything but great. 2 of the mighty waterways are at their lowest levels ever recorded. Hey everyone, I'm Christina Bear with Buzz 60 on Yahoo. A decade of below normal rain and snow plus higher temperatures has caused Lake Huron and Lake Michigan to look more like great puddles. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers announced that the lakes were 29 inches below their long-term average and that they've declined 17 inches since January of last year. In fact, it's the lowest level since they began keeping records in 1918. The other Great Lakes, Superior, Erie, and Ontario, were also well below average, and a federal official describes it as an extreme situation. And it's not just bad news for people who love to boat or hit the beach. A resident along Lake Michigan says that it no longer looks like a sandy beach, it's more like all rocks. The low water is causing widespread economic losses by forcing cargo ships to carry lighter loads, leaving boat docks high and dry and damaging fish spawning areas. Scientists and engineers have demanded action for years, but would need more funding, and the earliest they may see relief could be 2015. At this rate, it could take years of consistent rains to return the Great Lakes region back to its reputation as a water and winter wonderland.
It will be a close encounter of the asteroid kind. From outer space, a celestial visitor about the size of an Olympic swimming pool is hurtling towards Earth. A group of amateur astronomers in Spain discovered the asteroid last year, since when its path has been tracked. The chunk of space rock, known as 2012 DA14, is predicted to zoom by Earth next Friday, coming closest over the United States.
The close approach of this object 2012 DA14 on February 15th is nothing to worry about. Its orbit is very well known. We know exactly where it's going to go, and it cannot hit the Earth.
How close is close? It's calculated the spinning rock will be just over 17,000 miles from us. That's closer than any of the communication, television and weather satellites, which fly about 5,000 miles higher in the sky. But it begs the question, what if? It's spinning through the sky at about 8 miles an hour. Scientists have worked out an object of the size of 2012 DA14 at that speed would strike the Earth with a force similar to that of about 2.4 million tons of dynamite, enough to wipe out an area the size of San Francisco Bay. In 1908, an asteroid or comet exploded over Siberia. 80 million trees were leveled in that collision.
It's been revealed that a deadly blast that killed at least 37 people at the headquarters of the Mexican state oil company Pemex was caused by a buildup of gas. Officials say no trace of explosives was found at the site of the explosion in Mexico City. The gas is believed to have been methane. The explosion last Thursday afternoon prompted speculation about sabotage. Mexico's new president, Enrique Peña Nieto, wants a major overhaul of the company, which has been rocked by a string of safety lapses.
A leaked Justice Department memo outlines the legality of US drone strikes to kill American citizens abroad. The document, dated 2011 and acquired by broadcasting network NBC, justifies killing US citizens who are high-ranking members of Al-Qaeda.
We conduct those strikes because they are necessary to mitigate ongoing actual threats, to stop plots, to prevent future attacks, and again, save American lives. These strikes are legal. They are ethical and they are wise.
The document has drawn criticism from civil rights groups who question whether such killings are constitutional. 8 Democratic and 3 Republican senators have asked for more legal documents on the issue.
It's a chilling document. It goes to the heart of concerns we have in our democracy about the relationship between the government and citizens, violations of the most fundamental guarantee that the Constitution provides, which is that the government will not take citizens' lives without due process of law.
A protest in Pakistan against US drone strikes, organised by cricketer Imran Khan last October, drew a wide range of support.
Police in the US state of Alabama have rescued a 5-year-old child who was being held captive in an underground bunker. FBI agents stormed the bunker where 65-year-old Jimmy Dykes was holed up with the child. The siege had lasted 7 days since Dykes had shot a school bus driver and taken the child as he fled.
Mr. Dykes was observed holding a gun. At this point, FBI agents, fearing the child was in imminent danger, entered the bunker and rescued the child. The child appears physically unharmed and is being treated at a local hospital. The subject is deceased.
Negotiations with Dykes, a retired trucker and a Vietnam veteran, had deteriorated over the last 24 hours. The youngster, identified only as Ethan, is being treated at a local hospital, but is said to be physically unharmed. The hostage-taking comes amid heightened concerns in the US about gun violence. In France, hundreds of steelworkers scuffled with police near the European Parliament in Strasbourg. They're angry at plans to lay off workers at several ArcelorMittal plants across the country. Missiles were thrown and the police responded with tear gas and pepper spray. At least one protester was taken to hospital. Violence flared in southern Turkey when riot police clashed with a group of protesters demonstrating in support of the Kurdish community in Syria. Thousands had gathered for a demo organised by the pro-Kurd Peace and Democracy Party. Clashes broke out when protesters chanted banned refrains in support of PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan.
The head of an anti-racketeering organisation in Italy has set himself on fire in protest at illegal loans, usually given by criminal organisations. Frediano Manzi doused himself with petrol in front of the Milan headquarters of Italian media company RAI, to whom he'd written a letter about why he was taking such extreme measures. In the letter, Manzi says he was doing it for the victims of usury, but no one helps. Journalist and expert on anti-racketeering Nello Scavo says there are concrete difficulties, especially for families and small businesses, because in Italy it's not possible for private citizens or families to get access to state funds to compensate racketeering victims. It's slightly easier for companies. Unfortunately, in Italy, a vast majority of the victims, especially due to the economic crisis, are families who can't get bank loans anymore and who therefore turn to this form of illegal and clandestine credit. Manzi was found by a passing tram driver who quickly put out the flames. The anti-racketeering advocate is in a serious but non-life-threatening condition in hospital after suffering third-degree burns all over his body.
At least 26 people were killed in China when a lorry packed with fireworks exploded, destroying part of a motorway flyover, according to Chinese radio. The report said it happened in Henan province. Several lorries plunged dozens of meters when the bridge gave way. Firework accidents are not uncommon in China around New Year.
There has been a deadly explosion at the US Embassy in Turkey's capital, Ankara. Turkish media are reporting that at least one person has been killed and several injured in the blast. The side entrance to the consular building was targeted, reportedly the place where people queue for visa applications. It is not clear who was behind the attack. The US Embassy in Benghazi was targeted by Islamist militants in September, and 4 Americans were killed.
In northern Iraq, at least 33 people have been killed and dozens more hurt in a suicide attack on the police headquarters in Kirkuk. Authorities say 2 gunmen disguised as police officers drove a car packed with explosives into the building's entrance. It's the 3rd major attack in several weeks in or near the northern city, an ethnically mixed area of Arabs, Kurds and Turkmen at the heart of a dispute over oil and land between Baghdad and the autonomous Kurdistan region. Several armed groups are active in Kirkuk, and Sunni Islamist insurgents tied to Al-Qaeda often attack security forces in an attempt to undermine Shiite Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's central government and stoke sectarian tensions. French warplanes have bombed fresh targets in northern Mali in their efforts to rid the country of Islamist militants. The so-called major airstrikes were carried out overnight in the Tessalit area north of Kidal. Military commanders describe it as the last bastion of radicals who occupied the desert north for months before France's intervention. The action came just hours after French President François Hollande ended his visit to the country. He praised the work of French and Malian troops, but warned France would withdraw its forces once Mali has restored sovereignty and a UN-backed African military unit can take over. Drawn mostly from Mali's West African neighbors, this force is expected to number more than 8,000, but its deployment has been badly hampered by shortages of kit, as well as questions over who will fund estimated costs of up to €1 billion.
In Mali, authorities have started questioning suspected militants in the central town of Mopti. They've been linked to the rebellion that was sweeping the country before French-led forces intervened in mid-January. 8 suspects have been brought to Mopti's prison from Gao, 6 Malians, 1 Nigerian and an Algerian. According to the Attorney General, they all admitted to being members of Islamist militant groups, some linked to Al-Qaeda. Some of the men were discovered by civilians and had weapons of war on them, he says. A coalition of armed groups had taken control of much of Mali, including Timbuktu and Gao, before international forces pushed them back. After 3 weeks of airstrikes, many of the rebels have retreated to the northern mountains near Algeria.
French Defence Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian says that France could start withdrawing its troops from Mali within a few weeks, handing over responsibility for security to an African force. There are currently around 4,000 French troops in the West African country, and Le Drian said that this will not be increased. French and Malian troops are currently fighting Islamist rebels in the Sahara, and joint patrols are searching for insurgents in the scrubland surrounding the trading towns of Timbuktu and Gao. On Tuesday, Gao was hit by rockets fired from the bush, and some residents say they still don't feel safe. "I don't know what the army's doing," said this man. "If Gao is not protected for 50 kilometers around, and if a rebel fighter can set himself up just 10 meters from here and fire things like this at us, I don't see the point in the army being here." With so few troops securing an area more than double the size of France, Paris has appealed for the swift deployment of a UN-backed African military force, but this has been slowed due to a lack of transport and equipment.
Thousands of Egyptians have taken to Cairo's Tahrir Square to demand the overthrow of President Mohamed Morsi. Demonstrators also carried their protest to the doors of the presidential palace. As many as 65 people have been killed in violent clashes since January the 25th, prompting the head of the army to declare that the state is on the verge of collapse. We're demonstrating today because we haven't seen the realization of any of the aims of the revolution. We call again for the regime to fall.
There is no human rights in this constitution for the women. There is no education. There is no health insurance for anyone.
In Port Said, people mark the first anniversary of a soccer stadium riot that left 70 people dead. Last Saturday's court verdict that condemned 21 of the city's residents to death led to clashes between police and protesters, where dozens were killed. A curfew and emergency rule imposed on the city has further fueled local resentment.
Protests have resumed across Egypt in what's been described as a Friday of dignity. Several groups marched on Cairo's Tahrir Square, demanding a new unity government to temper the dominance of the Muslim Brotherhood. Other protesters have hit out at a decision by radical Muslim clerics to issue fatwas sanctioning the assassinations of key opposition figures. Among them is Mohammed al-Baradei, the former chief of the UN nuclear watchdog. Opponents of Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi want amendments to the new constitution and guarantees that the independence of the judiciary will be respected.
Egypt has plunged into a fresh outbreak of street violence as protesters vent their fury against President Morsi. Clouds of tear gas fired by police engulfed demonstrators who had pelted the presidential palace with petrol bombs. Well, amid the deepening crisis, the authorities have now decided to ban the YouTube video service in the country. RT's Belle True joins us live now from Cairo. Belle, what triggered the decision to ban YouTube, and how has it gone down with the public?
What happened this morning, Saturday morning, is the administrative court here in Cairo banned YouTube for a month after a lawsuit was filed by an Egyptian attorney last year when this anti-Islam film, The Innocence of Muslims, was sent to Arab channels and deemed very offensive to Islam and, of course, the Prophet Muhammad. This 14-minute clip sparked mass outrage across the Arab world, including here in Egypt. We saw mass protests in front of the US Embassy in September last year, on September the 11th, resulting in hundreds injured. Around 70 were killed around the Middle East as this violent protest has sparked mass outrage. At the moment, there's been a lot of condemnation of the ban by protest movements who see YouTube as a vital resource for disseminating information about human rights abuses by the security forces. It's also an indication of an Islamization of Egypt. There's been a number of quite controversial statements made by these hardline Muslim clerics in the last few weeks, including a religious edict calling for opposition forces to be killed, and a Muslim cleric speaking to an Egyptian channel justifying sex mob attacks on Egyptian protesters in Tahrir Square. What we really fear here in Egypt is this will only fuel further violence on the streets.
And Bell, with the country already gripped by the crisis, this latest clampdown on freedoms is unlikely to ease tensions, is it?
Absolutely. We've had a very restive country here in Egypt in the last 2 weeks, especially since the second anniversary of the January 25 revolution, when thousands gathered in the streets of Egypt complaining that the President Mohamed Morsi had not made key changes and demands of the revolution. Yesterday we saw, Friday we saw more protests as part of Friday's Day of Dignity. Thousands of protesters gathered across the main rallying points in the country, which devolved into clashes between anti-government protesters and security forces. In the capital here by the presidential palace, when groups attacked the building with Molotovs, they were pushed back by tear gas and water cannons. We saw bloodier violence in the governorates with unconfirmed deaths in Kafr Sheikh, as well as violent clashes in Alexandria, Tanta and Mahala. We have more protests on the horizon with further expected violence. We don't see this finishing anytime soon.
Okay, Bell, Chua, keep an eye on all that for us, of course. For now, thank you.
Violence has marred the funeral of assassinated Tunisian opposition leader Chokri Belaid. The shooting of the secular politician has plunged the country deeper into political chaos. Clashes erupted close to the Tunis cemetery as police fired tear gas at protesters who hurled stones and set cars alight. Authorities say around 100 people have been arrested. As many as 50,000 turned out to mourn Belaid's passing. Since former dictator Ben Ali was ousted from power in the first revolution of the Arab Spring, tensions between the Islamist government and its secular opponents have grown. His killing has sent shockwaves through the country, which hitherto had experienced a relatively peaceful transition to democracy. Banks, factories and shops closed in Tunis to condemn the killing.
Violence has flared in the Syrian capital Damascus. Smoke pours from a mosque in the Jobar district, according to activists opposed to President Bashar al-Assad, who posted this footage online. They also report government shelling in the eastern part of the city held by rebels. Elsewhere, a car bomb killed 19 security officers in the capital on Wednesday. Witnesses report that the sound of gunfire and explosions has been heard in most districts over the last 2 days. The government has managed to retain control of most of the capital as it tries to crush an uprising that has become a bloody civil war. The United Nations says around 700,000 Syrian refugees have fled abroad, almost a third of them to Lebanon. But in a new report, aid organisation Médecins Sans Frontières says the neighbouring country is unable to cope. It says Lebanon's Bekaa Valley refugee camps don't have enough resources to provide adequate shelter and healthcare for everyone.
The flow of refugees fleeing Syria has almost doubled since late last year, according to United Nations figures. Each day around 5,000 people seek safe haven in neighbouring countries. Some who are picked up at the border have mobility issues, while others have walked for several days to reach the crossing point. In Jordan, around 60,000 people are packed into the Zatari camp, and they've each got a story to tell. It was very difficult to cross the border because of the snipers. There were lots of them. We had to walk very carefully. I never wanted to leave, but the soldiers came and burnt our houses. They also attacked us from the air. The UN expects the exodus to grow and fears the refugee issue could become a long-term problem for Syria's neighbours.
We're likely to see entire villages probably coming over in a not too distant future. People are giving up hope in certain parts of Dara. And like the woman I was just talking to then was 95 years old. Who's 95 and decides to leave their country?
Most families have fled Syria with just a few possessions. With little chance to go back, they're now totally dependent on their host country.
Hundreds of people have been queuing for free food in Athens, handed out by protesting farmers. Food stalls have been set up around Greece's Ministry of Agriculture. The farmers are taking action against the high cost of production and want the government to reduce some of the taxes they pay.
من به صراحت میگم به شما
A 40-car pile-up on a Chinese motorway caused in part by bad visibility in the smog points to growing political strain. It's one of the consequences of the country's alarming pollution. On top of this, at least 20 flights into or out of Beijing airport were cancelled this Thursday morning alone, or delayed, as China's bad air continued to break new records. The capital has seen no lasting relief in January. The communist government is finding it harder to ignore people's mounting protests. The media are beginning to talk about it more openly after warnings to avoid going outside and telling Beijingers to wear masks if they do. This week, a small particles air index maintained by the US Embassy reached 517. The World Health Organization recommends a daily level of no more than 20. There's public outrage. This elderly resident says it's impossible to stay at home all the time. The air is so bad with the smog outside. If you open the window for long, the inside air gets even worse. We don't know how to solve this. People can't do anything. The authorities on Tuesday temporarily took 1/3 of government vehicles off the roads, but some 20 million people live in the capital. It has 5 million vehicles in circulation, a number which has been increasing each year by 250,000. Industry is the next main polluter. Largely in power stations, China burns as much coal in a year as the rest of the planet put together. Beijing also shut down more than 100 heavily polluting factories this week, but only for 2 days. Hospital admissions for breathing trouble have risen 20%. Doctors said half of those admitted to a children's hospital in the city were suffering from respiratory infections. This mother says, "I'm worried. My child has a skin allergy." She used to have symptoms only very rarely, but the doctor said that with the recent air quality getting worse, there are more and more patients suffering from this condition. A World Bank study in 2007 put the number of premature deaths because of pollution at 750,000 per year. Other sources say it's now more than 2 million, and that the incidence of lung cancer has soared by 60% in the last decade. According to state television, Premier Wen Jiabao has told other top leaders we should speed up enhancing our industry, push for energy conservation, and build an ecological civilization.
Forget Beijing, India's largest city, New Delhi, is suffering far worse pollution. The New York Times reports that on Thursday, a key measurement used to test air quality was more than twice as hazardous in Delhi as in the Chinese capital. Earlier this week, a separate Indian measure also showed record levels of pollution.
How severe your smog is going to be will depend entirely on the level of pollution that you are generating in the city. And that is becoming really impossible, because if you look at the pollution sources in Delhi, what is increasing very rapidly are the vehicles. Now you do have other sources, there are power plants, there is an industry, there are the open burning problem.
Delhi isn't the only city growing faster than nature can cope with. The World Health Organization lists 6 Indian metro areas among the 10 most polluted. The government is working on a new plan to improve air quality, but it's unlikely to be implemented for months, if not years.
At least 6 people have been killed as heavy rain caused flooding in the Peruvian city of Arequipa. The deluge tore through this area on Friday, damaging buildings and washing away anything not nailed down. Officials said 3 of those who died were found trapped in a vehicle on a flooded road. In the aftermath, residents were left digging homes and possessions out of at least 3 feet of mud. Emergency aid workers from the Red Cross were on hand on Saturday to help the clean-up. Many face a daunting task ahead as they try to put their lives back together.
The head of a British parliamentary commission on the food industry has called for all meat imports from the European Union to be suspended while investigations continue into the horse meat scandal. The government has rejected such a move, saying it would be against EU rules. The Romanian food industry has repudiated French claims that horse meat found in beef products came from its abattoirs. But the government in Bucharest is more cautious and is investigating. The agriculture minister said, "I asked for a report and I don't want to comment before the head of the Sanitary Veterinary Authority presents it to me. I hope to identify exporters as soon as possible. In the end, it's a matter of product control here before they left for other EU markets." The minister said French authorities had cast suspicion on 2 Romanian abattoirs. France, Britain and Ireland are investigating discoveries of horse meat in meat products. In the UK, Findus has said it believes contamination in beef lasagna was deliberate. The authorities say there's no threat to health, but the scandal has revealed a complicated pan-European chain of meat suppliers and traders, raising questions about quality control. Strike the bell, and according to legend, it'll bring good luck and prosperity in the year to come. There was no shortage of people in Beijing's Baiyongguan temple taking part in the traditional coin throwing for the Lunar New Year. In line with tradition, many Chinese families visited temples early in the morning following a night of celebrations. They burned incense and took part in prayers. In the North Korean capital Pyongyang, many braved the cold to climb Mansu Hill in the city centre. They went to pay homage to the statues of national founder Kim Il-sung and the late leader Kim Jong-il. The Lunar New Year is being celebrated all over East Asia. In many countries, the first day is a public holiday. They also celebrated in the Chinatown district of Rangoon or Yangon, the former capital of Myanmar and its commercial centre. The occasion was marked by a procession of several Burmese Chinese groups. In Australia, Melbourne's Chinatown was packed with crowds taking in street performances and tasting delicacies from stalls. One restaurant was reportedly charging nearly €700 per person for its 9-course New Year menu. And in London, dancers, singers and musicians provided a colourful contrast with the wet weather.
Got it, Owen?
Thank you.